Hello, everyone. We're doing something new with our governance webinar today. We're going to use Confluence instead of using slides, and I'm pretty excited about that. So I thought I'd just show it to you. If you're using Confluence in the cloud, there's this capability up here called presenter mode. And so I'll go into presenter mode and we'll go ahead and get started. Dietmar, go ahead.
Great, Bonnie, thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. It's still morning in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, where I'm connecting in from. Thank you so much for joining us today. Really looking forward to talking about a topic that is very near and dear to both Bonnie and me. My name is Dietmar Dörschlag. I'm a Atlassian certified consultant with Valiantys. And I come from 25 years with IT program, project, and portfolio management background, where obviously governance is really important. So really looking forward to spending this hour with you and talking about governance. Handing it over to Bonnie.
Yeah, so I'm Bonnie Byer, and I'm an engagement director here at Valiantys. And actually, my background is in engineering. I did 20 some years in engineering at avionics company, doing the software development, systems development, engineering management, project management, and all that, until they threw me over the wall to the shared services to manage the engineering tools and lead the agile transformation. And that's when I became fully embedded and enamored with the Atlassian tools. So that's who I am. Uh, shall we get started?
Yes, great. So thank you again for joining us. Really looking forward to this conversation about governance today. It's a topic that is really very near and dear to me. Um, just a quick word about who we are. Valiantys is about 23 years old, and we've been dedicated really 100% to the Atlassian ecosystem. We really enjoy working with a very wide range of awesome clients that represent many different industries. Um, there are some 65 organizations we work with from the Fortune 500 companies. And we really are a global company. We cover geography around the globe now, and that makes us Atlassian's really first global partner. One thing that we also do is we do actually full stack development on top of the Atlassian ecosystem. What we really focus on is lots of cloud migrations. We do a lot of agile at scale portfolio management and, of course, service management, enterprise service management, which is an area that I work in a lot. So this is a quick summary of who we are. I personally have been with Valiantys for 2 years now. I really enjoy working with our awesome clients, helping them transform their business using the Atlassian ecosystem. So it's a quick word about who we are. We go to the next slide. So this is sort of the agenda that we're going to go through today. Uh, Governance. Governance is a really interesting term. We're going to talk in a moment here what governance is and define it. But before we move on, I just want to share why governance is really important to me. I've been in project and program management most of my IT career, starting in the late 1990s. And as a project or program manager, I'm obviously very focused on a successful go live, right? We managed the triple constraint, but that's really short-sighted if I don't look beyond a go live. It's really important that I have a framework in place that keeps that system, that solution that we're building, really in an optimally tuned state. It's really that long-term perspective why governance is so important. And I have seen many times where the absence of governance in the projects that I oversaw really created a lot of chaos, and where the presence of governance really created calm waters. And there are really two terms that always come to mind for me. One is that if you have governance, a solid governance framework, you have predictable outcomes. Of course, there are always risks, but if you follow a solid governance framework where people buy in, your chance that the outcomes are predictable is much higher. And the second term that comes to mind for me is consistency, right? That you're doing things in a consistent manner. And for me, that's why I personally have really come to appreciate the importance of governance. Bonnie, how about you? How did you come to this topic in your career?
It's funny, I came in through the back door, coming from engineering. When it came to tools, engineers were more focused on what we're delivering to our clients, to our avionics supply, the aircraft companies. And so when it came to the tools, it was like whatever works, something just get in. And that happens a lot with Jira, where engineering will bring in Jira and they'll start using it, but they don't really think about what's the proper way to manage it, what's the best way to maintain it, and provide support for the people who are using it with the proper training and documentation, knowledge base, and all of the things that go into that guardrails of how do we manage our system and how do we use it appropriately. So I really learned all of that when I got thrown over the wall to shared services and found out, oh yeah, there's a reason why our email system actually operates the way we want it to, and why we have to sign on and all of those things. So
Yeah,
but yeah, we're
yeah.
going to get into the why do we care about this? Governance is such a topic that it sounds awful. It just sounds awful. Who wants the government in your company, right? But it's more than that. And so why do we care about it? And then who's involved? And that's a topic that's near and dear to my heart. How do we get started? If we're not actually practicing good governance over our system, how do we get started so that we can actually get there? And then I'll give you a demo on what our environment might look like. And there's a screenshot here, and we'll get into that later.
Great,
So,
awesome. So let's just talk briefly about what governance actually is. It's not government, it's governance, right? So definition here, I think, makes a lot of sense, right? It's the process of really making and enforcing decisions within an organization or a society. Um, I am sure you're encountering in your personal life a lot of governance, right? If you're going to a school board meeting, if you attend a church, if you are part of a fitness club or sports league, there are always governance principles in place, needless to say, right? So we are very much used to governance. We are just sometimes really forgetting the importance of governance in the IT context. And again, if you don't really have governance in place, solid governance that really is thought through, things can really fall apart. So in my project program life, I always felt it was really, really important that before we have that go live, before that system is turned on and users start to use it day in and day out, that we really think through how you want to govern that system, that solution over the long run, right? So it's really important that you figure this out way before you go live. Because then if you don't have clarity of roles and responsibilities, who is going to do what, how a change is going to be implemented, who approves, what are the authorities, it really can create a lot of friction and a lot of chaos, right? So I want to quickly touch on some of the really best practices. The word that I really want to emphasize here is representative decision making. There is never any point in bringing down the hammer. You have to have representatives from all affected areas represented in that governance framework. And Bon is going to talk about this in a moment. So that at the end of the day, everyone buys in, right? That decisions, sometimes not everyone might agree, but at the end of the day, people are behind it and support it. So that representative decision making is really, really important. We need to apply a holistic approach, a system thinking approach, right? Especially in the Atlassian ecosystem, which is so highly interconnected, so configurable. So we need to always really apply a holistic approach. If you're changing something in Jira, what does this mean for the connected pieces, right? Marketplace applications, Confluence, Jira Service Management. And the third bullet there is really, really important. So you see there are three pillars here. Practices, tools, people. it's actually not practices, tools, people. It's really people first, because it's really the people that drive the processes. At the end of the day, it's always a person that sits in front of the keyboard. And it's the people that drive the processes. And only then do we look at the tools. So tools really come last. Of course, tools are really, really important, but tools come last because we need to focus on the people and the processes first before we look at the tool. And the last point is really important for me, and I'm sure Bonnie agrees, the importance of change management. There are different methodologies out there. And when I'm talking about change management, I'm really referring to the people side of the change. ProSci, the ADKAR model, where you're raising awareness for that change first, right? Why is that change needed? And only when you have created awareness for the change do people really want to be part of the change, that desire in the ADKAR model. And only then do you focus on knowledge and ability and eventually reinforcement. So that's really important. Here's some underpinning best practice principles. Bonnie, over to you.
That was great. That I can't agree more. So, well, why do we care? We care because we want the tools to actually be operating in a way that they serve us. If you actually are following good standards, following the best practices, and actually managing your system so that you have data designed to interact, you can have so much more capabilities within your system. You're able to track that full life cycle. You're able to understand all of the dependencies and risks and scope and schedule, and you're able to visualize all that and not have to recreate progress reports and presentation materials to communicate that stuff that goes stale within an hour. Instead, you're able to have all of that real-time data doing all the work for you. And that improves all of that operational visibility, and it improves collaboration. It makes your teams more effective. They can focus in on what they want to build. Maybe it's an aircraft autopilot, but that's what they want to work on. That's why they hired into that avionics company. They don't want to have to worry about whether or not the tool is going to provide the information to the executives or the management. They just want to work on what they're doing and input the information they need to, and then it all flows up and reports for them. And so that is really why we care about this. When you look at some of the systems, we might see something like this. Dietmar, what in the world is this?
So Bonnie knows me quite well, and Bonnie knows that I really like to be out in the mountains. I guess it's in my DNA. So when I think about the absence of governance, really, this picture comes to mind. And this is actually not a picture of my garage. It's a picture that I took off the internet.
It's a
So
picture of Minecraft.
just imagine you are going on an important climb. You're out in high altitude. It can be dangerous, and this is how you prepare. Um, that's not a good go live picture for me, because the likelihood that you miss something, maybe a rope, a ice axe, whatever, is pretty high, right? And that can have really pretty significant consequences. That kind of reminds me if an unapproved change is implemented after go live, it can really blow up in your face. So for me, that's the absence of governance, right? Why the absence of governance can have really very consequential outcomes. So next slide, there's actually a very different way of doing this. So the picture on the right is actually little me in the late 1970s. It's a picture that I pulled up from my photo album. I think it was one of my first serious mountain climbs with my dad. And what you see there was, first of all, 1970s clear equipment, right? There was preparation, there was a rope, there were carabiners, right? Picture on the left is where you have everything well planned out, right? There, you leave nothing to chance. You know exactly what you need to bring on that journey, right? You have thought it through. You have defined in a climbing party the roles and the responsibilities, right? So that you don't walk into base camp, go live, and then all of a sudden realize that you have really missed some important equipment, which once you're up in the wall, you're getting into real serious trouble. So for me, that is a personal story. For me brings home why governance is really important, and why we should not only apply governance in our personal space, whatever your hobby might be, but we should really apply it to implementing IT systems, because the consequences of not having governance could be very, very significant. So that's kind of my personal story. Next slide real quick. There is a report that Valiantys did, the hidden cost of data chaos. So we obviously realize that good governance feeds good data. If we don't think through how we govern Jira, Confluence, Jira Service Management, we don't collect good data, right? And that absence of good data has significant impacts, and very often those impacts are hidden. We call this the hidden cost of system chaos, right? Um, there is an underestimated impact of poor data quality, right? You see some of the aspects that we show here, right? There are compliance risks, right? There are customer satisfaction risks, right? There is maybe missed revenue opportunities. Go to the next slide. Um, we sometimes only focus on the missed cost reduction opportunities, right? For example, if a workflow is not configured correctly, if your issue types in Jira are not set up the way they should be, right? If roles and responsibilities are not clearly defined through permission concepts, groups, roles, permission schemes in Jira JSM, we are not in a position to reduce our cost, right? The speed of throughput to get to a complete done status. But there are actually also opportunities that are getting lost, right? Market opportunities are getting lost. So I wanted to make that point that data is really, really important. Everything that we are doing in the Atlassian ecosystem obviously collects data. Data is collected for decision making, and we cannot get that data unless we focus on governance. That's really the important point we wanted to make here. So handing
Yeah.
it back over to Bonnie, who's going to
Yeah.
take us through more details on governance.
I mean, the catastrophic kind of mountain climbing, it can also be catastrophic losses of opportunities. So that's a really great explanation of why we care. So, do any of these sound familiar? We have something called the Jira Hall of Fame at Valiantys, where we capture some of our worst case scenarios, hundreds of issue types, thousands of custom fields and workflows, statuses. I hate to imagine what that system looked like with 2,655 statuses.
That looks
Oh
ugly.
my. Dozens or hundreds of Jira admins, and this image of this workflow. Oh, and that's from somebody at Valiantys who saw that on a client system. But I remember seeing something like that at the company that I used to work for in avionics. And it's scary to think about what does that really represent. That if this is sounds like you, or even if you just have dozens of these and dozens of workflows and dozens of statuses, that could signify that you do need governance over your Atlassian tools. These are our record numbers, but it doesn't need to get to that point. So let's talk about that and let's get that cleaned up for you. So what does that look like? If you have uh, your Jira configuration, all you need to do is look, do all of our projects have their own issue type and their own workflow scheme, a whole bunch of one-off configuration schema sets? Then you probably need some to look at standardizing some template kind of categories and group those together. Do you have several dozen issue types? Do you have multiple versions of done? I love seeing systems that have done and complete and closed and finished. And my favorite is where you see canceled with one L and then canceled spelled with two L's. It's like, really? So If you have dozens of resolution values, and many of them mean pretty much the same thing, or hundreds of custom fields, are your admins trained or are they inexperienced with the Atlassian tools? There's ways to remedy that. We have boot camps and really make sure that they understand what they're doing so that they can apply that governance, even if they don't go full board on having good governance, at least make sure the admins are trained. And do you have several dozen people with admin permission? Because if you have that many cooks in the kitchen, that's going to be a problem. So if the answer to some of those questions is yes, then you probably need to start looking at this closer in your organization. I capture here some of those common challenges to address. Certainly that wild west configuration is a major problem. I see it in the majority of our clients, at least when they first start working with us. Permissions and security issues. Those are quite complex, the different options and the different intersections of those within the various Atlassian tools. And so really being, I hate to say this word, but being anal about it is a good thing. IT people need to be anal about permissions and security issues. End
Yep,
user training, yeah,
you
right?
might not always make friends when you're anal about permissions, but locking things down to the proper roles is not unimportant. Absolutely.
And that end user impact, do they have the proper support? Do they have the proper training? Those are challenges that need to be addressed by that governance committee. Admin training and system cleanup. And then that, of course, all the capability for your PMO and your agile support, all of the great functional capabilities that you can take advantage of, and the trade studies that you can look at the different options from Atlassian and from the marketplace. So those are just some of the things that we often look at when it comes to governance.
So let's talk about who is actually involved in Atlassian governments next. So as I mentioned earlier, my background over many years has been in IT project program and portfolio management. I actually built up and managed a fairly sizable IT PMO in a large public sector organization, the transit agency up here in Vancouver, British Columbia, which is actually one of the top 5 ridership agencies in all of North America. And we, in a project context, obviously had to have a project governance framework in place, right? We call it a steering committee. And in those steering committees, we obviously had representatives from the various business areas and IT that represented the interests of everyone, every stakeholder group, right? If we put in a new finance system, an ERP system, we had representatives from the business area that sat at the table making decisions with respect to that system. But that was only a project governance framework that took us up to go live. Now, here we really need to think about who is involved in the ongoing sustainment of the solution, of the Atlassian tools that we put in. This is what this is really all about. So let's talk about who is involved. Product owner. You need to have someone who owns the Atlassian suite, right? Uh, Somebody needs to be accountable, responsible, making those decisions, right? There needs to be a product owner. A product owner obviously is an agile term, right? In the Scrum framework. But even if you have a waterfall approach, because for whatever reason that is the right way for you to do it, you need a product owner. Um, Maybe the product owner chairs that what we could call an Atlassian governance board or whatever name you choose. We also really should include the administrators, those folks who are really deep in the tool that know how it's configured. They can speak to the effects of making configuration changes, right? Um, and then you need to have engaged emphasis folks from the various areas across the organization that use the Jira, GSM, Confluence, and other Atlassian tools, right? Their voice needs to be heard, needs to be represented at the table. So give it some thought as to who that membership should be. And of course, that membership, as your business evolves, grows, scales up, can change. So what are they actually doing? first, they really establish the vision and the goal. So why are you using that tool? How does the use of the Atlassian ecosystem align with your corporate objectives, right? Um, that is really, really important. But also, what is the goal of the governance committee itself, right? Have a terms of reference of what the governance committee's roles and responsibilities are. And they identify, implement, and document the supported systems. And when we say document, we're not going down to the very granular level of every Jira JSM conference configuration, because that, of course, changes. We're really talking more the architecture design, the big pieces, right? Um, the cadence in which that committee, that board, whatever you call it, meets is of course subject to how it works in your organization. We think that a monthly cadence at a minimum is a good idea. It really depends on how active your instance is and how many changes there are coming in, right? They need to review change requests, right? They need to review maintenance schedules, right? If you're in cloud, um, there are various ways that you can keep your system upgraded, right? It can be in a continuous release track or a scheduled release track. So the governance committee needs to provide oversight to all of that. And the last point is, of course, there are always changes in any ecosystem, and the board members need to collectively discuss it and then approve it and agree to it, right? So this is kind of how we see the various roles that come together in that governance framework. Uh, Bonnie, any thoughts from your end?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how many times I've said it. There is no such thing as a free plugin. Sometimes people will say, "Oh, well, it's a free plugin. Let's just install it and see how it works." And there's no such thing because you have to consider what is the impact. Is it introducing a whole bunch of configuration? Are we providing end user support and end user training on this? So when we say you need to consider all aspects of the change, you need to consider those as well. So yeah.
Yep. Great.
So how do we get started? Well, you got to name that governance board, and as Dietmar said, you have to think about what is our vision, what are our goals, what's our purpose. We've got an example governance vision statement and purpose here, and feel free to borrow those. But really, a good best practice governance is to look at ensuring that there's balance between what is the enterprise goals and their growth, and the balance between that with flexibility for what's being controlled by the employees that are using the system. And so trying to find that proper balance is an art. There is no specific definition that fits all organizations, but that's the goal there. And then the purpose is that they want to support that creation, discussion, and decision making, and then the implementation of those products and configurations and applications. And so if when we talk about establishing this governance board, they want to identify that vision and that purpose and define their scope of responsibility. And some of that scope of responsibility would be on these components. Are we responsible for Jira and Confluence and maybe our configuration control or our portfolio management solutions? Are we responsible for end user support, or is that being managed elsewhere? They need to think about all of the different scope of responsibility and the scope of the tools that they're intending to represent. So, and then after they get started, they're going to go into their architectural decisions. They need to think about what are the layers of scale for our system, and what is our hierarchy of issues, and what does our data topology look like? And by data topology, there's three examples here of how that hierarchy can be laid out in the Jira projects, but there are other examples also. This is just three options that I grabbed this screenshot from. But if you don't have a consistent data topology for your Jira system with templated projects representing the different teams that operate in the system, then that's one of the first areas that you need to look at. They also then will start thinking about their program and portfolio requirements and deciding what are the team level customizations and integrations that they need to support. So I think it's time for a demo. So I'm going to go ahead and exit out of this. I'm going to end full screen view here. And so here at Valiantys, we have a governance space that we often use for engagements when we work with our clients to help them understand, okay, how do you operate your system? Now, if we're starting from a greenfield with a client that's just newly onboarding, we'll help them use this to define what their system looks like for both configuration, architecture, as well as their support models and their communication models. But if we're working with a client who's been working in the system for a while, we'll actually show this and say, okay, where do you have this documented? Do you have this documented? Some of it might actually show up in SharePoint. Some of it might be in some individual's personal Confluence space. They might have a knowledge base Confluence space, and then they have an administration Confluence space. It might be scattered all over the place. That last option, being scattered all over the place, is probably not a good idea, but you might have individual spaces for different pieces of this, and that's okay. This is just an example. But for your governance board, you should have essentially your mission statement, your purpose and goals, as well as your membership and your scope of responsibility well understood and documented. And then you talk about your practices, your administration, and your knowledge base. And so that's how we have arranged this in these three areas. I'll start at the easy part first here, the knowledge base. And so when we talk about the knowledge base, we might be documenting a little bit about our actual Jira configuration. And so, for example, if we had an enterprise project category and we had various other types of project categories, maybe you have one for your software teams, and maybe you have one for firmware and one for marketing business teams. Whatever the different project categories are, you want to have enough information documented so that they can see exactly what that means. And so it's like a handoff of documentation between the admins and the end users. So when they're requesting a project, they know if we're requesting a business marketing project, we know we're going to get these issue types and they're going to be based on these workflows and these fields. And you communicate whatever any specific workflow details or custom field details that are necessary for them to know what they're getting that's unique about their project category. You'd also have your Atlassian documentation links, your various YouTube videos or documentation from Atlassian. You don't want to recreate the wheel. They've got all that stuff out there for you, but there might be certain ones you want to highlight for your end users that, hey, this is really where you go to find all of the JQL search capabilities, or this is great training material on how we use Jira Align, or whatever it is that so you can have that called out. Don't recreate what they provide. And a lot of the vendors like Tempo and Script Runner, some of these add-ons that you can include in your system have fantastic vendor documentation. So you don't want to manage that. You want to just link to it. But you do want to document what are our best practices. An example here would be like, how do we manage our sprint naming conventions? Or maybe how do we set up our advanced roadmaps plans for our executive board meetings? Saying, okay, these are the types of views, this is the type of fields that we want to display, and this is how we configure our program boards. So that kind of how we do things here at our company, that goes in your knowledge base. And then we have our administration section. And again, this could be their own space or their own SharePoint. But if it's in various personal spaces or on DeepMar, admin DeepMar's hard drive, then you don't have this well documented, because Dietmar might win the lottery tomorrow and is long gone. So you want to make sure you have this, and he's off mountain climbing, right? And so, so you want to make
On
sure you, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, on that documentation topic, what I want to just chime in is in the old days, we did what? We wrote extensive documents with screenshots.
Oh,
Today, we love to produce Loom videos, right?
oh,
Which
yeah, Loom
is
videos
just
are
so
fantastic.
much more effective. So when Bonnie and I work with clients, if we want to document the solution that we built, right? We just do a walkthrough with our clients, maybe a 1 hour session. We walk them through the various configuration elements and we record it on a Loom video, and that becomes part of the documentation repository. First of all, you don't need to copy paste screenshots into your documentation. It's interactive and people so much more enjoy that. So that really is the new world of documenting.
Yeah,
Just a really great way to do that.
that's a great call out there. Yeah, and so also in that administration, uh, Loom can be used for some of these common activities, like creating a new Jira project using these shared schemes that we have defined for our project categories. Uh, these Atlassian administration sections going to have the naming conventions and those kinds of run books. They might have their change request process, how they manage changes, and they certainly need to have their maintenance activities. What kind of information do they need to have for their yearly housekeeping or for their regular sandbox updates? If you're on data center, then you would certainly have information about upgrades and the processes that you follow in terms of reviewing the release notes and testing out the different application add-ons that you have and making sure that operations are looking for obsolete plugins because now it's native in Jira or something like that. So all of those maintenance activities would be captured in this area. And then the governance practices themselves. You want to have all of the information centrally located about what are the best practices that we're following, and what are the decisions that we're making. Uh, this is an example of all the different decisions that you would probably have to make for a brand new system, such as your look and feel and your global configuration settings. But maybe you don't need to capture all of this if you're already in the system. You just need to review it and make sure that all of those decisions were made properly and accept it and move on at that point. But your product access groups, get back to that roles and responsibilities, security and access issues, and your JIRA hierarchy, your project category structure. What are the different project categories that we're supporting so that we can get those defined? All of these different things will then lead into resolutions and link types and permission schemes and all of the different types of schema sets that you would need to define. And so all of these can go into that decision log, decision-making process. And you would have all of that fully transparent to all of the end users as they're making requests, because at first you're building out your architectural decisions, but then you can make decisions based on your decisions of change requests. When you get a request that we want this new plugin and we must have it now, and we, everybody lives through that, right? And then the admins come back and the governance board starts discussing, well, what are the different options? We have these 5 different options. What are the requirements we're trying to satisfy and make that decision making? They can capture all of that into one of these decision pages and explain the decisions that they've made.
Maybe we just give one practical example. So I recently worked on a GSM implementation for a very large US client, and we built 150 automations for that client, migrating them off ServiceNow to JSM. And many of the automations we built were based on a condition which was one particular Jira custom field. So just imagine someone would go in and disable, remove that screen, that one particular custom field. The entire solution would essentially stop working. So this is one example where documenting those decisions and controlling the decision that you made. In this particular case, a custom field is really, really important because it can really completely shut your instance down. One global client that we worked with, a very well-known brand in the food delivery business, they went as far as locking this down to the point when you need any change made to a custom field, you need to submit the change request via a GSM portal submission. That's how they locked it down, recognizing the importance of not quote unquote monkeying around with the system, knowing the dire consequences. So those are two examples where recording those decisions that you made and locking them down are really, really important.
Yeah, and so locking them down, I want to caution because we're not saying that everything has to be locked down, but for your company, you have to think about what is that balance, and it is an art, and it will be based on the different integrations that you have and the different requirements. And that's why having this information captured will make it so that the people 5 years from now, after you've won the lottery and moved on, we'll have the information about why did you create this the way you did. And so along with that decision log, we also have our change request process. We would fully document to all of our end users, if you want to change, this is the process we follow. What is our support model? How do we support our end users? What is our training model? And what are our communication plans, and how do we model that? So really this governance practices, Atlassian administration, and this knowledge base is kind of the structure of what we would stand up in a Jira governance board space. So that is my demo there. And feel free to, if you have any questions about any of that, put those in the chat. We will be taking any questions you have, but I will go back into our presenter mode.
Thanks for that, Bonnie. So let's go back to the topic of data for a moment. I like this quote, data being the new gold. I think it's a pretty obvious statement, but it's really worthwhile emphasizing it. It's so important that we focus on data because data obviously support decision making. When we get a request to create a new report, I think the first question should always be, well, what decisions are you making that data should enable your decision making in, right? And of course, that speaks to governance. Garbage in, garbage out. Unless you have the processes clearly defined, how you collect the data, that the data that you're collecting is actually reliable for decision making, you really need to think this through. So if you, for example, measuring I don't know, GSM agent performance from ticket raised to incident closed, well, you need to have a clear understanding of how your workflow is configured and when, what the conditions are for your agents to transition through a workflow. Otherwise, the SLAs that you're measuring would obviously not be very valid. So really, data goes hand in hand with governance. Visibility, see what the teams are really working on, right? Gaining new insights. And then as a term that is really important to me that I mentioned earlier, consistency in how things are being done. So that is just a point we wanted to again make that data and governance really goes hand in hand.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts from you on that topic, Bonnie?
I just love this little data flash drive image.
Yeah.
It's the new gold. Data is definitely the new gold. And so,
Yeah.
we wanted to make sure you understand that we can help you with that. Sorry. We can help you establish those healthy guardrails for your governance path. And we do, of course, in the interest of always wanting to make every interaction remarkable. That's one of our company core values. We do try to provide value in every interaction. So this webinar, we hope that you learned something, and these webinars are always free and always freely available on our YouTube channel. And I'm sure we can actually get some of those links in the chat to some of those. We also offer a governance workshop. It's essentially like one of our boot camps. We have a Jira boot camp, which if your admins aren't trained, they really should be taking it. I personally think these Valiantys boot camps, the Jira boot camp and the Jira service management boot camps are the best I've seen. And I've worked with a lot of different people. So I'll just stop there before I say too much. But the governance workshop is also a boot camp, and really it just walks you through a lot of what we covered today, but in more detail so that you can actually start making some of those decisions for your company. Or if we do a public boot camp, then we'll make up an imaginary company, but you'll actually learn the steps of governance and that decision making. And then we also offer governance engagements, and we often do that. The timeline, I'm guessing 2 to 4 months to really get you up and running with your own governance board, establishing some of your architectural decisions and what your support and training and communication models are, helping your admins pull together all of that variously scattered documentation and build out the other admin maintenance plans. The length of the engagement often depends on how experienced you are, how experienced your admins are, as well as how engaged you are. And so I hesitate to say that it'll only take 2 months or that it'll take only 4 months. It varies from client to client. But it is a valuable activity for you, whether or not Valiantys is involved. I hope you all take what we've said in this webinar to heart.
So quick word on how we operate. I think the most important word on this quick slide is the word value in the center, right? We really believe that every interaction counts, and every interaction that we have should create value. It's at the end of the day, it's all about value. And of course, what that value is for you in your respective organization is different between the clients we work with, but it's all about value, right? We're committed to working with clients and really producing value for them. One aspect that I also really like about our culture is that we have folks who are really curious, right? We have a network of only 600 of us globally now, if I have the number right, in various geographies. People work on so many different solutions, so everybody is really in learning mode all the time. AI, for example, is a very big topic right now, right? So people are very willing to share the knowledge, what they learn, right? So that's really being cutting edge curious is a really important thing for us. So this is some aspects of our culture that we really like. With the next slide, and then we can get into Q&A. These are the things that we focus on. So left to right, Bonnie and I are both heavily involved in consulting engagements. We want to be that trusted advisor, hand in hand with our clients, helping them business transform. That could be a Jira health check assessment, right? Which then, of course, has governance baked into it. It could be a Jira service management migration from a legacy system, whatever it is, ServiceNow, which I've been doing a lot lately, or other legacy systems, right? It could be in the Jira world, in the agile at scale enterprise agility area, right? We also, of course, focus on licensing. You always need licensing to run any system, and we are there to support you in your licensing needs through a licensing center of excellence. As I said earlier, we actually have a full shop development, full service development shop. So we do a lot of integration development, bolting solutions on top of Atlassian, but also sometimes completely custom developed apps. Managed services, if you don't have the expertise in-house to keep the lights on, so to speak, to be that Jira, Confluence, JSM admin, we also provide those services to you. And one topic that Bonnie and I are both very passionate about is training. I'm teaching Jira boot camps. They are 3 days. We don't flip slides in those boot camps. We're actually configuring the software from the ground up. So it really teaches you how the inner workings of Jira. We do the same thing for Jira Service Management, which is a 2-day boot camp, and for also Confluence, which is a 1-day boot camp. And they can be public classes. Just go to our website, Valiantys/training, or they can also be private classes as well. So those were some of the things that we do. So with that, open it up to any questions we might have. Brianna, if there are any questions from the chat, we can go to that. Otherwise, Bonnie and I'm sure have a few questions that we would like to ask ourselves from our experience with Confluence. So if we have any questions in the chat, we can answer them. Otherwise, I have some questions that I actually want to ask Bonnie.
I think we have one question. Someone was looking to find the location of the Hidden Cost of Data Chaos ebook. I was actually in the background looking around for it, and I'm struggling to find it. But if you, whomever asked this question, wants to reach out to Bonnie or Dietmar, I will be dropping their emails in the chat, and one of us will be able to locate that for you and definitely share that information.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, here's my email and here's Dietmar's. And we're also both on LinkedIn. I'm sure I'm sure I have that paper on my hard drive, but so I can certainly send it to anybody. But I'll have to go look for where it is on our website. Speaking of papers, though, we did just recently publish a paper that I very near and dear to my heart on establishing, what was it called? Reaching the tipping point through acquisition, establishing governance over your processes and tools. It's actually a case study based on us working with Tempo, where Tempo acquired several different companies pulled together, and all of these different companies were all operating in different ways. And so I worked with them last year to help them unify their processes and through a process mapping type activities, and also unify their Jira system, because all these different companies coming together, they had quite diverse Jira systems as well. So that was really an amazing experience working with them, and we wrote a white paper on that. And so that's available for download from our website as well. And Brianna, if you have that link, you can put that in the chat too.
Fantastic. Thank you, Bonnie. That's great. So one question I wanted to ask you, Bonnie, is what are some of the pain points, if I can use that term, that you personally experienced trying to stand up governance in an organization that maybe was not used to standing up governance? I remember from my project management days that sometimes people maybe don't see eye to eyes, right? Things can get heated, contentious, especially in complex organizations. I worked in organizations that have a corporate head office and operating companies, right? The operating companies had their own boards, their own executive teams, but then there was a parent company who had their own board and their senior leadership team. So what are some of the pain points you saw trying to stand up that governance, and how did you work through that?
Well, the things that I see when if you in your company right now wanted to go stand up your governance board, names may vary. It could be Jira Advisory Board, Steering Committee, Change Control Board, whatever you want to call it. The roles and responsibilities are what define that board. And the things that always are the biggest impacts, or the biggest requirements for that to be successful, are that they need to have authority to make the decisions, and they need to be engaged and to actively be working towards those decisions. That authority, often that requires that you to have that executive sponsor who's giving them that authority. But they have to have that authority to, as a group, representative group, that's why representative authority is necessary, to make the decisions for that organization's Jira topology, for their workflow practices, for their project categories, for all of those things, because you will have debates, you will have people that disagree, but that board is responsible for settling their disagreements and coming to a decision. And then when they implement that decision, they can't have people that are fighting that tooth and nail. They as a representative group, they need to be able to make those decisions and be supported in that.
Yeah.
And in order to be able to do that decision making, they have to be engaged, which means not just diving in and arguing with each other until they come to an agreement. They also will have to be talking to the people that they're representing so that they're actually representing them well. They need to be able to find out, okay, project manager John, why do you think we need this? And understand why they're requesting this custom field.
Yeah.
What is that field supposed to support? Or understand what requirements they're trying to satisfy with this plugin request. So that you can actually represent them well in that governance board.
The
So,
example that comes to mind for me is that I, as a PMO leader, was at the table in an advising capacity, not in a decision capacity, in a capital investment committee that oversaw literally hundreds of millions of dollars in investments a year. This was in public transit, where you're building SkyTrain lines and SkyTrain stations for millions and millions of dollars. And that committee was comprised of 7 VPs, and they represented the various business areas, right? Engineering, IT, the CIO, finance, et cetera. And of course, they had reviewed the proposals well before they came to that committee. They had studied them. They had obviously consulted with their reports. And then the sponsor came in, pitched their proposal, supported by a project manager, and then a tough decision had to be made. And maybe initially in the conversation, not everyone was in agreement, but then it always was a unanimous decision. And sometimes, yes, people agreed to only reluctantly, but at the end, it was a unanimous decision that they then carried into their respective parts of the organization. So this was in an investment committee context, but I think the principles there would also apply to Atlassian governance, where you're making sometimes difficult decisions, right? What apps are you turning on? You're making changes to a workflow, which has significant impacts on how people operate. It always should be, I think, a unanimous decision, even though not everybody might initially completely agree.
yeah. Well,
Good.
before we wrap, I did want to mention that we are having this governance webinar again in May. Actually, I think it's on May 1st, but it's not going to be our regularly scheduled governance webinar. We're going to have guests coming for that. From Tempo. If any of you watched our webinar back in July last year, we had Brandon and Robin from Tempo, and we were talking about the governance activities that we were performing on their process and on their tools. And that was an interview style discussion. And that was when they had first started off doing their first quarterly planning type activities. Well, we're going to have a follow-up in May to see how things are going. So if you want to see either of those, the one from July, you can find that on our YouTube channel in the governance playlist. And we have the next one scheduled in May. And I think, Brianna, if you could put that link in the chat, I invite you to attend.
Awesome. Looking forward to that.
So,
well, thank you everyone for joining today. Really appreciate it. Thank you, Bonnie. Governance is super important. Bonnie and I are both very passionate about this. If you need our help in this, let us know. Thank you so much again for attending, and we wish you all a great day. Thank you so much.
Bye.